Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's session inside online at the Camberwell Civic Precinct as part of the Open House Melbourne weekend. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung people as the traditional owners and original custodians of this land, and pay my respects to their elders past and present, and for those who may be watching us today. So my name is Bridget and I'm from Boroondara Arts, and I'm joined with my colleague Sophie from Boroondara Arts and Sharon from the Boroondara Library Service. Just before we begin, just some housekeeping today. So we're in a webinar session, which means that you can only hear and see the panelists. We do ask that you engage with this session through the Q&A function, so you can add comments and questions, and my colleague Sophie will be monitoring that throughout the session. We have disabled chat, so the only way to communicate with us is through the Q&A section, and that's just to make sure that we're hearing from everybody and engaging together. So Open House Melbourne is a fantastic way to celebrate our local history and heritage by looking into some significant sites across Boroondara. City of Boroondara has been a part of Open House Melbourne for the last 5 years, but this is the very first time we're opening up the Camberwell Civic Precinct, and we're really excited. This precinct has been home of council services since 1890 and comprises of 3 buildings steeped rich in history, architecture and heritage. Today, Sharon will take us through some significant moments, alterations and stories of this site. The presentation will go for about 30 minutes, and we encourage you to ask questions throughout the session, and we'll address them after Sharon's presentation, and hopefully we can provide you with some answers. So I might just get Sharon to unmute herself just to make sure, and we'll get underway. And so Sharon, to begin us off, can you provide us a little bit about how Camberwell came to be?
Okay, so hello everybody. Camberwell, the suburb. One of the very first buildings in Camberwell was a hotel, yes, the Camberwell Inn, that was on the corner of Burke Road and Riversdale Road, and believed to be the first building after white settlement. So built in the late 1840s or around 1850. So the owner of this hotel called it the Camberwell Inn because that intersection there, the Grand Junction that we all know so well, reminded him of an intersection at home in Camberwell in London. So that's why he named his inn the Camberwell Inn, and people just started to refer to the area as Camberwell. So that when Camberwell was proclaimed a town or suburb in around 1870, it was named Camberwell because people were already using that term, using that name for the area. So the Camberwell Inn we have to thank for the name of Camberwell today. Okay, now this is a very early photo of Camberwell, of the area. And you can see lots of sparse land there. The Camberwell, and obviously all that area was started off as Crown land in the 1800s, was considered to belong to the Crown. There was a large parcel of land that was about to be purchased around about 1851. Someone was going to build, Mr. Jury was going to build his house there and have that as his land. That sale fell through and that land reverted to the Crown, and it was decided to create a reserve on that land. So the land that you see that's sparse today. So you've got Inglesby Road there, and Camberwell Road is the large road going through. So they had this large reserve that was there. And if you look at a Google map today, there's a small part of that land that still is grass, nowhere near the size that it was, of course, and marked as the Camberwell Reserve. So that is still there today. So this is a few years later, obviously, and we've got trams coming in, and we've got, that would be considered in the early 1900s to be the centre of Camberwell. You've got the post office on that corner. As far as I know, there is only the one building that still exists today, I believe. And it's that one on the right-hand corner with the steps built into the architecture at the top there on their facade.
And Sharon, could you tell us a bit about the size of the population at that time?
So the population grew quite a lot. It was the main, I won't be able to quote the figures, but the main boom in population was, there was a small boom in the 1850s, another significant boom in the late 1880s, 1890s, and then another significant boom in the years after the First World War, so between the wars.
Yeah.
And services all came through to Camberwell at that time. So we had electricity and gas and the train, of course, by 1900. So we had all the services that come through at that stage. So yes, very popular area.
Yes.
Yes.
And who looked after Camberwell in the 1850s?
Okay, so all right. So the first, really the first local administrative authority were the Boroondara Roads Board. Now that photo, that's not a photo, I believe that's obviously, that's a painting. And I think it's more of a symbol than an actual building, because the Boroondara Roads Board didn't have a space of its own until the 1870s. So the Boroondara Road Board was formed in the 1850s as a result of the people of the area were really concerned about the condition of the roads in the area. And this was a concern all around the state of Victoria, and roads boards, local roads boards formed in all, I think pretty much all populated areas of Victoria. So you read of the work of the roads boards. The Boroondara Roads Board initially included Hawthorn and Kew, but after about 10 years or little less, actually, they moved away and formed their own entities. So the Boroondara Roads Board was initially to maintain the roads in the area, which apparently were in really bad shape because people were obviously moving livestock, horse-drawn vehicles. Some of those vehicles would be large. So the one of the worst ones that I read about is in Whitehorse Road in Balwyn. So for those people who are local, the part of the road I'm describing, I believe, is just east of Balwyn Road. So down near the library, probably, or a little bit back from the library. There's a little dip in the road there. So I guess I'm presuming that's where the road was really, really mushy and quite bad. And John Mailing, who, of course, Mailing Road was named after John Mailing, was one of the earlier settlers in that area. He had quite a lot to do with the developments in the area. And he wrote to council about this road. He wrote to council quite often. But he wrote to council about this road. The local people called that strip there the Bay of Biscay because it was in such poor condition. And one of his letters to council about the condition of this road was requesting that a lighthouse be erected on the Bay of Biscay, so on Whitehorse Road there. Obviously a man with a sense of humour and tongue-in-cheek, but obviously pointing out how very bad the condition of the road was and how treacherous it must have been driving your carriages, your horses, or even walking these roads after dark.
Yeah.
So yeah. The Boroondara Roads Board initially was working with the maintenance of roads, and then they did gradually move over to other concerns, local concerns.
Yeah.
And
they were funded with tollways, is that?
Yes. There were toll gates all over the city. So toll gates, paying tolls aren't anything new. We might think, since the 1970s, we've had all these toll roads put in, but they're not anything new. We had them 100 years before that. So toll gates were all over the city. Now, these little clips that I have are actually warnable. I've not been able to find any images for the Boroondara area, but I presume it would be reasonable to say that this is the way the system operated. So Boroondara Council actually they benefited financially, or the Boroondara Roads Board initially, from tolls, 7 different tolls. At least 4 of those were within the Boroondara precinct, and they also benefited from some others just out of Boroondara. So there was a toll on Whitehorse Road in Balwyn. There was another toll gate over High Street, I believe, in Ashburton. And they benefited from toll gates just near the river crossings, so over towards Kew and Richmond. They benefited from these. And the tolls brought in tremendous amount of money. It was only a few pennies or shillings, as you can see there, to get across. You paid depending on what your vehicle was, or if you were moving livestock through the toll, you paid more money. Some people were exempt from tolls. So politicians, for example, didn't have to pay the tolls, if politician. The police didn't have to pay a toll if you're a member of the clergy. If you were carting manure, you were exempt from the toll. And for events, so if you were attending church on a Sunday, or if you were going to a funeral, you didn't have to pay the toll.
Yeah, cool. And so obviously the town over the years was expanding, so they needed a place to meet. So can you tell us a bit about this building here?
Yes, well, those of you who are local to the area, people think of that white building on Camberwell Road, the very grand town hall. The old one is the first town hall, but this is in fact the first of the Shire halls. And this is on the site where the current Civic Centre is in Boroondara, in Camberwell. So this building was built around 1870, opened in 1871. It was obviously a brick structure, as you can see. You can see the sign. I just love the sign in the window there that says they've got rate collectors in there, so you can pay your rates. And they've got the inspector of nuisances. So if you've got anything that's a nuisance, you went in there and you could report the nuisance. So I'm guessing nuisances must have been probably roads, but it might have been neighbours, fencing, wandering stock. All sorts of things might have been nuisances. That hall opened in 1871. It didn't have a ceiling, so it was open at the top there. It had Venetian blinds on the windows, kerosene lighting, and a wood burner. So this is the era, because electricity was already available largely during these last decades of the 1800s. But a lot of people, when they updated in the late 1880s, late 1880s, they updated the lighting in this hall. They went from kerosene lighting to gas lighting. And I've read many instances of the late 1800s and early 1900s where people, including family members, debated when these fuel sources were becoming available, would they go with gas or would they go with electricity? And the common feeling of the day seemed to be that electricity was going to be short term. It was something that would come and that would go, that the governments would not be able to sustain electricity as an ongoing resource, and that it would become much more expensive than gas. So a lot of homes here around Australia and also overseas, I've read in London, where people opted for gas heating and gas lighting rather than having the electricity connected. So when the lighting was improved on this hall, it was gas lighting. So that's what they put in there. The building was structurally unsound from the very beginning. And if you looking at this image, there is a suggestion that it may have been built in 2 parts. It may have been smaller and then extended. You can see the lean-to extension on the back, but I'm talking about that line halfway down. So there are some suggestions that that was part of the problem. It had what many of the historians referred to as a bowed or bent wall. So, and the council spent quite a lot of money over the 1880s having that building fixed up so that it didn't crumble down around them.
Yeah.
But that was on the site of the Civic Centre. and certainly the first Shire hall for the city of the people of Camberwell. It was used for a whole range of things. So there was some office space, obviously, for initially the Roads Board and then the Shire, because the Roads Board became the Shire. So there was office space and there was hall space, and people, the Camberwell Cricket Club in the 1880s, they met in that hall.
Yeah.
So, lots of people hired the space.
Yeah. And so obviously this building is no longer standing.
No.
And it was replaced.
Yes.
Can you tell us a bit about how this beautiful building, which stands,
came to be? Yes.
Came to be.
Yes. Well, this opened virtually 20 years after the previous hall, and that's the one we equate today as the Camberwell Town Hall, of course. This was an era, the late 1880s, there were these grand halls opening, town halls opening all around Melbourne. One of the very first, I think the first might have been the South Melbourne, Emerald Hill, as it was then. So the Emerald Hill Hall opened, and that was a bit of a benchmark for other councils. So people of Melbourne will be familiar with all sorts of other halls. There's the Collingwood, Fitzroy, of course, Prahran, St Kilda. All of these shires built these grand halls in the late 1800s. This one here, we were lucky. This was built just before the dreadful depression of the 1890s. So there are some suggestions that that might not have gone ahead if they'd held off a year or two. And that's probably why possibly not everything was completed. And you can see in this image, there's no clock. And there was no clock. This building opened in 1891, and there was no clock until the 1920s, 1924, I believe. So the council decided the other building was in such poor condition, so that was an issue. And so there was a decision that, to read the council minutes, to quote a councillor, is that Camberwell needed a new town hall more in keeping with the dignity of the people of Camberwell. And so tenders were put out for this new hall, and we're lucky this one was built.
Yeah.
And still stands today, quite beautiful. And I wish that we were there today, everybody, having a wander through and wander around, looking at all the features.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, so this photo is taken 1891, I believe. It's early 1890s anyway. It's a gathering of the councillors soon after the hall opened in 1891, standing on those front steps, and that doorway is still there today, though not in use, of course. Yes.
Can you tell us what was in the first hall? The second town hall, sorry?
Yes. The first town hall, had that beautiful theatre. So the first town hall was divided into 3 sections virtually. So we had this beautiful grand theatre here. The Precinct was added in a couple of years later, but there was a stage there from the very beginning. So there were 3 sections. There was this beautiful hall here, that included the stage, changing rooms and toilets at the back. There was a second section that was a magistrate's court. So you can see there on the back right-hand side of this, at the back there, you can see the cells. So this was a police station officially. There was a courthouse, courtyards, cells, there was a magistrate's office space and a sergeant's room and a constable's room. So that towards the back, that's at the Inglesby Road end of the hall. You had that area. You had the precinct to the left there, which is, and I believe we were talking before, I do believe this map is flipped, but this is an original plan. And so you've got the recreation hall there, and you can see the, at the back of it, back of the stage there, you can see the change rooms, etc. and amenities that are there. And then the other part of it to the right of this map is the office space that was there. So you had the rate collector's office and office space for various people. The health department was in there. So health department looked after things like even then immunisations, the pan collection. They had somebody, because even though sewerage was connected around about 1906 to the hall, a lot of the people of the area would have had pan service right through. Even up to the 1960s, that was still operating. You had the dog registration, all sorts of offices and things that are in there. They did have toilets right in there, from the inside toilets, of course, from the beginning of 1891 when this hall opened. Yes, and you can see the image there with the clock tower. Yes, so that's as it stands today. Yes, quite beautiful, and we're quite lucky to still have that. Yes, yes.
And obviously the site changed over time. Can you talk to us about some of these alterations that we have a plan of?
Yes, yeah, there were many alterations to the site. That building was extended, I think 5 or 6 times in various ways, always for extra office space being needed. It's amazing to me to read this and to know how administration has expanded and expanded and expanded. And we're in the technological age now with computers and things, but it doesn't seem to have cut back on the staffing required. But this image here shows one of the renovations that was done. So you can see that the map drawers or chart drawers or whatever that are being put in, this is the 1910 renovation that was done. The building was extended, yes, several times, and all these different alterations occurred.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then also too, famously back in the day, well, up until recently even, there was caretakers who lived on site to look after the buildings. So can you take us through these plans here?
Yes, so this is the second caretakers building, a cottage that was to be added, I believe, or is it the first? Let me see. No, so this might be the first. These are actually part of the plans for a second building. So if you stand on, for those people who are local, stand on Camberwell Road now, you can quite clearly see the first building of 1891, and to the left or the east side of that building is the second building, and that's the drawing that you have at the top there. I notice that's got library there. I don't believe a library ever went into that building. And this was built all as office space. And there was the Caretakers Cottage, yes.
This one here.
That was there as well. There was a caretaker, even the first hall of 1871 had a caretaker, and Caretakers Cottage was provided. This cottage was built later on, and then there was the third Caretakers Cottage, which I believe this Camberwell Historical Society are using now. That's in Inglesbury Road. So I think to myself sometimes, well, what did a caretaker do? How good would that be? They gave you a house and you could be the caretaker on site. But I guess if we think of it in terms of, today, the city of Boroondara, the council, we have this huge gardening team who does a wonderful job keeping everything so lovely. And we can feel so good about our parks and our gardens, and they're doing that. And then we've got our maintenance team. So I guess the caretaker looked after the yards and the gardens and kept everything looking beautiful. And I guess he was the person you contacted if a door jammed or the toilet wasn't working or whatever. So they lived here, and I presume that they had to, obviously they'd be responsible for the security of the place. So they'd have to stay on site and be available until late meetings or whatever an evening finished. So, yep. So, yes.
And we believe that the Caretakers Cottage was about here, don't we?
I think it was about there or around a little bit further back. That first Caretakers Cottage, the second Caretakers Cottage on Inglesbury Road was built in the 1930s, but that first Caretakers Cottage was there until the late 1960s.
Yeah.
So it was only demolished when they built the Civic Centre that we can see part of behind it in that image there. Yes, but the Caretakers Cottage was towards the back of that building.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
And some other interesting little bit as well about the site was this fence and why it was erected around the building itself.
Yes, because this stands, this building obviously stands on the reserve. When the late 1880s, by that stage, the Camberwell had its reserve that was bounded by Inglesby Road, Burke Road and Camberwell Road, so quite a large piece of land. And that was a reserve and it was fenced. So the public couldn't just wander through, I presume. All of those earlier images have that reserve as being fenced. When the land was given over, as I said, there's a small part of the land still called a reserve today, but it's largely all built on now. Part of it has the large car park beside the school. Various organisations applied for to have some of the land. So we have the Basilica, the Catholic Church, were the first people to be given a portion of the land to build their church. And we have the, yes, as I said, the Basilica that's facing Burke Road at the moment. Then later on, not much later, actually about 15 months later, there was another parcel of land given over to the Catholic Church, no, to the Church of England, the Anglicans. So they had some of the land. And then the last parcel to be handed across was to the school that's still there on Camberwell Road. So that was initially called the Camberwell Common School. And then later on, of course, the Camberwell State School. And then more recently, of course, we call that the Camberwell Primary School. So that's in moving with that. But I do love, see, if you're looking at that photo, you can see the fencing is still in place and you can see the verandas of the old shops and homes that were opposite there. Now, I have a friend who says that he visited his grandmother in Camberwell Road often in the 1970s, and she lived directly opposite the hall, the Camberwell Town Hall. So obviously those were houses right along there. He said that was all housing in Camberwell Road, and because today we have all commercial and office space that's there, so that's all gone. Yeah. So yeah, I love that image because you've got, that shows quite a bit of that history that's there. And
another bit of history is this photo here, of the image of the opening of the renovation in 1924.
Yes, that's right. You can see by the ladies' clothing. So that is the opening of that second building. And that's at the time they also built the second, well, really the third, but the second existing Caretakers Cottage at the back there over on Inglesbury Road. But I just love, don't you just love that photo? I love the ladies' fashions.
Yes. And we were speculating yesterday whether that was the actual mayoress who often would have done ceremonial things opening the front door. So that's a really gorgeous photo.
Yeah, we have this photo, of course, comes from, it's courtesy of the State Library. But they don't seem, they're only able to have circa 1924. We don't have a definite date or who these people are. But because they have this 24 date, we would presume that that was to do with the opening of that new premises that was largely office space. It really was just for extra office space for the people. And the lady in the front there, look, all the ladies with their hats. I just love that.
Yeah.
And a handbag.
And something else which was significant that opened up in 1924 was, of course, the clock.
Yes. So the clock was added there, and you can see there's some sort of event with the people in the foreground here are looking up at the new clock. So it was all happening there. So I guess this was a fairly prosperous time between the wars, the 1920s. for many of the Western countries. Yes.
And also too, can you tell us, obviously Camberwell, there's a famous Camberwell in London. Can you talk about the connection with Camberwell in London and then Camberwell here?
Yes, well, as I said before, there was the naming, almost incidentally, the suburb was named Camberwell after Camberwell in England because of the Camberwell Inn and people referring to the area as Camberwell. But the Camberwell Shire always had an affinity and considered a sister city with Camberwell in London. So they did various, there were various connections. There was support done through the war years, 1940s, especially the late 40s and early 1950s. Yes, so there you see, there's the photo there. So there, because things in London, of course, as many of you would know, was pretty grim after the Second World War, rather. So rationing continued right through the 40s for the people of England. And it was not unusual for people to send parcels. My mother in the 1950s was working in Myers in the city. And she said that Myer had a program where they put together non-perishable food products and you could have that sent over to London. And so she used to put some of her wages into that. So all over the country, there were programs. And this is an example of the city of Boroondara. So the photo there on the left, I believe, is food that was collected and sent to Camberwell in London. And on the right there, you've got the children packaging up. I find that really quite amazing, that photo on the right, because you've got like sitting in the seating, you've got the adults there watching and the children seem to be packing up all these toys. But these are true photos of how the people of Camberwell and the city of Boroondara supported the post-war effort and to support the people of London.
It's amazing. And I suppose another amazing image we have, and I find this quite fascinating, especially in today's time with COVID-19, etc. But it was this image here. Can you let us know what this is about?
Oh, right, yes. Well, this is, I believe, probably 1950s. These are people coming, the hall had many uses over the decades. And at this stage, it's being used as a TB X-ray space. So sometimes town halls were opened up for this. This was a program, I believe, at state level, right around, because TB was a dreadful condition a health condition that people were battling in the first half of the 1900s, first half of the 20th century. And so councils offered TB X-rays. So again, I remember my mum going, there was a caravan that used to come around to the suburbs, and my mum went to the caravan in our suburb in Mitcham, and I remember standing with her in the queue to have a TB X-ray. And these people here have come to the Camberwell Town Hall to have their TB X-ray, and I find I can't help but see an analogy between this photo and what we're, experiencing now in a different way. But again, it's people going to our large meeting centres and queuing up for the health support that's needed to deal with the issues of the era.
Yeah. It really underpins the whole thing that, a civic space was always built for the community to address community needs and, support these services, which were so important to keep our community safe.
Yes.
Another thing that you think Camberwell Civic Precinct does today, and something that's synonymous with the site, is of course the library that we have. Can you tell us about the early beginnings of the library? And this is our favourite photo of this whole session. But yeah, can you tell us a bit about how the library got to be at Camberwell?
Yes, well, this is Camberwell had its first library opened in the town hall in 1961. in 1938, or around about 1940, a new police station was built in Camberwell, and it's still there on the corner of, I think it's Butler Street, I believe it's Butler or Butler Street, off and Camberwell Road. So a police station was built there, and with its with the premises, there was a house, a police house over there, as well as a police station initially. And the cells were all moved over there. So that freed up a lot of space and for extra office space in the town hall. But by the late 1950s, mid-late 1950s, there was more and more talk of Camberwell needing its own library. The city of the Shire had only been supporting one library, I believe, in the area, financially supporting, and that was over at Canterbury. Canterbury, of course, had the large theatre and other utilities over there. And at that stage, I have read that Canterbury was considered to be the cultural precinct of the area. So some historians say, and I love to say that because I live in Canterbury.
Oh, very good.
I don't know whether that's true, but anyway, they decided they needed a library. So this is the plan on the left. I love this because being a librarian, I just thought, oh wow, look at this, look at what they've got there. But you can see how the alterations to the original building to include a library in the 1960s. So the new library opened, and one of the things that I do really enjoy is the map has space there for a workroom and the bookmobile for various branches. And so you've got this very large tiny tots area. It's funny, I sort of find in myself, I think of that as a modern term, tiny tots, but of course it's not. It's something that's been used for a long time. You had the adult and the teenage library, and there's all the office space there as well, and the hall keeper's office, which is interesting again. So you can see, and that's on the 2 levels. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So that was the first library, 1961. There was an earlier library, some oral histories that were produced in the, I think, 1990s, late in the 1900s anyway. A couple of people talk about a library earlier on in the 30s and 40s, 50s in Bowen Street in Camberwell. But I believe, I can't find any evidence. I don't think that was connected in any way to the Shire of the day. I think that was some sort of private, there were many private libraries around Melbourne and before the public libraries opened.
But even to this, it demonstrates that there's a library, because this does look like it's in that recreation hall of the original town hall.
You can see, yes. If you look at these photos, you look at the background to the structure of those buildings and the windows at the back, you can see, yes, that's what that is there. Yeah. Yes.
Now, I suppose there is one more building, which is came in the late 1900s.
Yes.
Wow, it's really amazing to say that the 70s were hundreds, but can you explain to us what's happening here?
Yes, well, of course, this is the Civic Centre that we have today that is being built. And one thing, the photo on the right there, I particularly like that in the background there, you can see the Camberwell Baby Health Centre. So that was at that stage on the side of that older building. But yes, so you've got that there. But this is the workmen and all the work, and there's quite a lot of photos. If people are interested, the libraries have more and more photos of this site when it was under construction. So the image on the left there, that's Inglesby Road, of course. On that border. So this was the new Civic Centre that was being built, and that occurred in the late 1960s. All of this work was done. There was a recognition that Camberwell needed to have its own, and so that moved all the office, well, not all, most of the office space over into this building, and left the other building for the library. So the library, the Camberwell Library, was in what we think of now as the old town hall for about 30 years. Wow. This new building here on the right initially had, when it opened in 1969, I believe, it opened with 3 reception or function centres. So it had a large one that accommodated over 1,000 people, around about 1,100 people, and second hall that accommodated around about 500 people, fitters, and then there was a smaller meeting room for about 150 people.
Yeah.
So yes, so this was the use of this building. The council chambers also moved over to this building at that time.
We've got a picture of that coming up. Yes.
Yes. So this is the library. Obviously, the one on the right there is the library in the older building. Yeah. And then the one in the left.
Yeah. And then here's
both of those are the older building. Yep. Yeah. And this is the opening. So this is an image of one of the reception centres, one of the 3s, and this is the opening ceremony for that event.
This picture reminds me of the Blackwood Hall that's at Monash University. I assume it was a similar era as well, so similar style. Yeah.
Yes, it does, very much so. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Yes, and you can see that's. I'm not sure that it is parquetry. I think it might be on the stage floor there. Yeah. Yes.
Which was very similar again to the sites at Monash.
And in on that one, you can see the ladies in their, their 1960s, 1970s hats. So still wearing hats around that time. A lady did not go out without her hat. So yes, you've got the crossover happening there, and the large theatre that was there.
Yeah, gorgeous. And then this one is of the chamber that you spoke of before.
Yes, that's right. So council chamber was moved across to there at that stage. And also was there for about 30, or no, not quite, around about 20, just over 20 years. Council met over there. Yes. And
I suppose one of the latest additions to the building is this. I just love this picture of the glass structure which sits in front of the library.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Yes, yeah. This is obviously this is much later. In 1992, I believe, this building was completely renovated, and the library was moved there. Council chambers were moved back, and and the library was put in here. That glass facade there is, I don't believe, the 1990s. I'm not exactly sure. I think it's much more recent.
I think so too. 2010. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. And then, of course, today Camberwell is the home of the city of Boroondara. Once it was re-amalgamated with Hawthorn and Kew to become Boroondara once again, and is considered to be, its head office really for the for Boroondara Council. And and there's thousands of staff that are based, or not thousands, I should say, a couple of hundreds of staff which is based at Camberwell pre-COVID, of course, but it's still
Yes. Well, I often wonder how many people work in that building. I do,
it's very busy every time we come over. That's for sure.
Not in that building, of course, in 3 buildings. There are 3 buildings across that site now, all connected, and we think of them as times as what seems as you wander around. It was one building because they're all connected with passageways and corridors and things.
And this picture could be updated because there's beautiful outdoor seating now in front of the library.
That's right. As a reminder of COVID, of course.
Yes.
One of the many efforts that councils around Melbourne are working to create outdoor spaces for people to sit, and because we have the fabulous cafe in there.
We sure do.
Nice, yes, we all love.
And I suppose one of the main thing is that this building, there's customer service. So this is on Inglesby Road, heading into the 1960s, 70s renovation. Yes,
that's right.
And I think it's beautiful when I was researching this with you, Sharon, in regards to the buildings, that the building which was built in the 60s is an ode to the original building with the beautiful archways that are in the original building.
Yes, that was when the building was built in the late 60s. That was deliberately one of the things that was incorporated, that they wanted those arched windows there. in keeping with the building of 1871 that I think was demolished. If you read some of the oral histories, there's a suggestion that that building was actually moved from the site. So it's hard to know definitely, but in my mind, not having any expertise in the building field, a building that is structurally unsound, I would be surprised if they moved it. So I think it was probably demolished.
Or reused, bricks reused.
Yes, hopefully, yes. But certainly those windows for that purpose.
And so this is as Camberwell stands today.
Yes.
Well, the original town hall, and it's beautiful inside. And it's just a shame, that we had to go digital because we had a beautiful tour through this. We
really wanted to wander around.
Yeah. We'll be back next year. So.
Yes. Like, for example, one of the things that we found there, remember, was in 1871, there was a mile post put in the front of that hall, and we located and it's still there today. So I think it's 6.5 miles from Melbourne. So some of you who are old people like I am may remember that all around Victoria there were mile posts. And all of the mile posts told you how far to Melbourne. So it didn't matter where you were in the state of Victoria, the mile posts told, because I can remember my father, who was a Queenslander, lamenting that apparently the mile posts in Queensland told you how far to the nearest town.
Yeah.
Melbourne, was how far to the centre. And of course, Melbourne, the centre was the GPO, as all towns then, the centre was the GPO. Yeah. So, yes, so we have, that's still there. Yeah.
Thank you, Sharon, for sharing all that expertise knowledge. It's really good. Sophie, I believe we've had some questions throughout the session. If you want to fire off, and perhaps Sharon, if Sharon can't answer it today, we definitely follow us with an email, because we can definitely find out for you as well. So yes, Sophie, do we have questions?
We have many questions, many of which you have answered along the way, Sharon. Thank you. But one question I have here is, does the original hall in the 1891 building still exist as a hall or reception space?
No, not really. There is, as you walk around, and we were hoping to show you this, there is some evidence of the architecture and the design within there, but the space is certainly there, but it's not a reception hall at all. No.
Another question is, what is in the recreation hall area now?
That space now is council chambers have moved back into that space. So, because if you can imagine, it was like, a really large hall. So now it's 2-story. So there is quite a lot of office space in there. And council chambers are in there, and there's meeting space too that's used by the people employed with the city of Boroondara.
Yeah, it's almost like an office complex within the recreation hall, isn't it?
Yes,
almost. Like they've kept the facade around it.
Yes. And if any of you have wandered around the State Library in the city, you see how they've incorporated those, tried to keep those early architectural features in place in amongst the new design for the new building, and it's quite similar to that inside the Camberwell precinct there, the old hall. Yes.
Wonderful. One more. Is the Civic Centre location for the Shire Hall the same location as the current library and area next to the current Town Hall Council area?
Yes, I believe so. It would seem that the hall, if you think if you were standing on Camberwell Road and looking at the building where the library is now, you've got, is it Reserve Road? It's at the end there. I believe that the hall was on that end from everything that I've been able to find on plans. Yes, so that where the Civic Centre is now, or the library, and probably at the Park View Room end of that building is where the original red brick town hall stood. Yes, yep, that was the site. Yes. Oh, good questions.
I do have two more for you now.
Okay, good.
Earlier in the presentation, we were looking at one of the old theatres, and we're wondering if that still exists.
So I presume that's the slide that had the stage and the seating. So that is the original hall, and that does not exist in that format now at all. So is this in the old hall or in the Civic Centre, do we think?
I believe it's in the old hall.
Yeah, either way, both of them have gone. Yes, as theatres, they've both gone. Yes, yes.
This question might require a bit more research, but someone's wondering if the toll tickets history could be traced via Fairfax and lorry printers in the State Library, or history of Fairfax.
I didn't quite get that. Could you say that again, Sophie?
Wondering about tracing the history of the toll tickets. Someone's wondering if that could be traced via the history of Fairfax or the lorry printers in the State Library.
Okay, well that's possible. That, yeah, as you say, that's something I really need to look into. Various people mention it briefly in their books. Geoffrey Blaney's book, History of Camberwell, of course, mentions them briefly, but I haven't seen any really terrific reference options to follow up with. They mentioned, I've had a look through Trove. I was quite fascinated because I had no idea that there were toll gates in the area. And then to find out that they're right within, the area we're in, there are at least 4. And that the council was benefiting from others. I knew in the past about the punt on the river, of course, but I didn't realise there were actually toll roads. And those tickets from Warrnambool are even the only ticket evidence that I've been able to locate. Yes, the state government actually brought in legislation initially tried to get it through in 1872 to stop the tolls, saying that it was not fair and reasonable for local governments to be benefiting from the money of people using public roads. So tolls were made illegal at that stage. Councils around the state and certainly around Melbourne fought that legislation. And it took about 3 years, I think, for it to get through before it became absolute. And when that happened, the Shire lost a third of its income.
Wow.
Which of course had to be forwarded on to ratepayers, unfortunately. So people paying it either way, I guess, perhaps you could say. But the councils made quite a lot of money out of the tolls. One of the tolls that council only got a portion of, they benefited, I think it was something like £3,000 in 1 year, that's from one toll, and that's a toll they only got a portion from. So obviously, they were making quite a lot of money out of the tolls, and you can see why councils fought to have that law stopped. So, yeah.
Yeah, and considering how much the second town hall built, it was about £10,000.
Was it about 10,000? Yes.
Yeah, so £3,000 is a lot of money.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Yeah, it's quite incredible. Yes, yeah. But yes, I found that there was, in one of the slides, there's that photo of the building, which is on, I think it's Heritage Victoria or Victoria Place's website. That building is tagged as the toll gate room in Doncaster. So that's not even ours. So I just, there's another image floating around which says that it's a toll gate on the Yarra, but it's not a clear image, and it doesn't, I wondered about the credibility of it, so we didn't include that. But yes, so there's, certainly I hadn't come across it before, and I was fascinated by the tolls, so I was really interested in that. Yes. Were there any other questions?
Just lots of thank yous now, Sharon.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you to people. If yeah, and as we said, if it's wonderful the information that you can glean from oral histories that have been done in the past. Yeah. I mean, you can read all the council documents, you can read council minutes and other historians' work and all sorts of things, but to read the oral histories. So yeah, if people have things they'd like to share with us, stories, things that they remember.
Yes.
Yeah.
Please do so.
Yes.
And I guess I just want to, well, I don't want to guess, I do want to thank Sharon so much for providing this presentation for us today. Not gonna lie, on Monday when I called you, go, right, we've got to go on digital, and you were just so excited and so willing to contribute this for our community. And I think it's been such a wonderful presentation. So thank you so much for taking the time to develop this with us for this.
No, it's absolutely my pleasure. Absolutely. And I have to say thank you to you, Bridget, and to Sophie, because Emily from the libraries as well, we were coming up with new images, and Sophie had put a lot of work into her presentation, into putting together the slides, and we were still throwing more images through yesterday saying, oh, what about this? We love this one. And we had so much to share with you.
Yeah,
so,
there's such a rich and heritage that has connection to Camberwell. And just to continue on what Sharon about saying, if you've got a story about Camberwell, even if it's about you going to the library as a young child, or making your debutante, or just even remembering stories of Camberwell, the Boroondara Library Services and me, because I just love this, all this kind of stuff, would love to hear from you. Collating stories is the one way that we can continue on to, another 50 years that people are telling our stories about how we did Open House Melbourne digitally for the first time. So please, I would encourage you to do that. Also big shout out to Emily Grant. She is the historian at the Boroondara Library Services, and she's just an absolute wonder to work with. So thank you, Emily, for all your support in supporting Sharon and myself and Sophie to put it together. Thank you to Sophie for being our amazing operator behind the scenes and delivering those questions for us. Your help was, I couldn't have done it without you, love. Thank you so much. Also like to thank Open House Melbourne for having us along for this weekend. It's been wonderful again to be part of this wonderful weekend. You can continue to learn more about Boroondara's significant sites. So Camberwell is one of 8 sites which are open digitally for the Open House Melbourne weekend. So at 1 p.m. today, you can log on to Zoom again and find out all about the Hawthorn Arts Centre, which was the former Hawthorn Town Hall in Hawthorn. And then at 3 p.m, we'll be working with the Kew Historical Society to present you a story about the Kew Courthouse and Police Station and GPO. So thank you once again for taking the time. It's great to have you with us this morning. Hopefully we'll see you at 1 p.m. Otherwise, enjoy your Open House Melbourne weekend. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Okay, thank you.